All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for Web Development and Design Foundations with HTML 7th edition by Terry Felk Morris. We're up to Chapter 7, which starts on page 295 and is entitled More on Links, Layout, Mobile. Code relative hyperlinks to web pages and folders within a website. Configure a hyperlink to a named fragment internal to a web page. Provide for accessibility by configuring ARIA landmark roles for structural HTML elements. Configure images with CSS Sprites. Configure a 3-column page layout using CSS. Configure CSS for printing. Describe mobile design best practices. Configure web pages for mobile display using the viewport meta tag, and apply responsive web design techniques with CSS3 media queries and flexible images. Now, as we start, just so you're aware of this, it's kind of a hodgepodgey chapter in that, again, the author talks about a variety of different things. All right, hyperlinks, and then CSS Sprites, then a 3-column page layout, CSS for print, and more about mobile. So again, there's just a bunch of stuff that some of which we've started on, and we're just going to keep going. Such as, well, if you look right here, if you talk about a relative link, okay, a couple things here. Notice, all right, it says here contact.html. So that's supposing that we're right here. If we're at index.html and we want to go to contact, well, all we have to say is equal contact.html because it's at the same layer or level as where I am. Same kind of thing if we wanted to bring up casita.css. Now, from the Canyon page, which is shown right there, if we want to get back to the index page, well, notice we have to jump up. So right now we're literally in this level, and we want to jump up to the other level. So we say ... which means the parent / index. All right. And if we want to go from where we are down to events, we again go at ... to jump up, and then we go to events, and then to weekend. Now, one thing that I showed you before, you may or may not have realized it, but this HTML linking to fragment identifiers where this div ID equal top. Again, one of the things I'm going to make available for you, and I mentioned this to you previously, and that was this folder that I have that's called Mount Rushmore, and this file that I put in here. So if I go down to the very bottom of the file, and I click the back to top, you can see what happens. I go back up to the top. Well, if we take a look at the page source that's in there, you'll notice that at the top of the page, we've got a hyperlink, and it just says a ID equal top. And then anytime I want to be able to jump up to that page, for instance, if I go down to the bottom where we had that link for the top, we say href equal # top, which basically means that what we want to do is we want to be able to jump up to the link on the page that's got an ID of top. All right, equals # top or ID top. And again, that's what we set up at the top of the page. ID equal top. So now any place in here where we reference top, and you'll see if I type in top here, notice there's 28 matches. All right, and as I work my way down, back to top. So there's about a dozen occasions in here where we do that. Maybe not that many, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 there, so there's at least a dozen right there. All right, one thing I guess I didn't do, and I thought I had done this, was in here, I thought I had set up links for all these other ones, and I didn't. Because you can set it the other way too. So in other words, right here, I can go the other way, where it goes the dedication, and I click there. What that should be doing is it should be pushing you down to right here. Whereas top pushes you up, those ones up there would push you down, so you'd kind of use the reverse. So in other words, this would have your ID of the dedication. Let's see if we can do that and fix at least one of these. In fact, let's just here. Where is it? So the top one that's in here is the father of, let's go down to the bottom to the related URLs. Okay. All right. So at the top here, we have a ID equal top. Well, I'm going to copy that line, and I'm going to go down near the very bottom where we've got our URLs. Related URLs. Notice we do have it here. ID equal pound related URLs. All right. So where we have that at the top, a href, well, I'm not sure why that's not working right now, equals pound related URLs. All right, that is what I wanted to do, but for whatever reason it doesn't appear to be working. So again, hopefully you understand what I'm mentioning to you, and that is the idea that if I click here, what I want to do is I want to go down to right here. And all the back to tops are working. I can click on any of them, and regardless of where I am, I'm jumping back up to the top of the page. But the other one was to be able to jump from here. So if I clicked the dedication here, I would be jumping or moving right down to right there. Now it might be that for whatever, now that should not have to be a hyperlink. I wonder if it's because I've got the pound sign there. If it should just look like that. Let's check and see now when we go to related URLs if that works. So I'll refresh related URLs and I jump down. There you go. So those should all be changed. So where it says ID equals in front of all these things here, there should not be a pound sign there. Problem when you're trying to do this too quickly, as I'm probably trying to do right now. So now that's good. Hopefully I've fixed it all. So let's take a look. Again, I will refresh. Back to the top. Now Father of Rushmore, boom, I'm there. Good. Ready for a change, good. Mixed signals, good. Escaping Stone Mountain, good. New Horizon, good. The Waiting Game, good. Presidential Attention, good. dedication, good. Men and Mountain, good. Flirting with Danger, good. Modeled Masterpiece, good. And finally, our related URLs, so they all work. Again, I will make sure that I keep a copy of this, but what I want you to understand is the way that this works, and this is what's explained in your text. Let's just take the one here. You set a hyperlink, all right? And you just say ID equals, and you give it a name. Then when you actually want to utilize that, you say another href, but you use the ID in there. That's what they're trying to explain in the textbook as well. All right, so maybe they explained it better, but hopefully I showed it to you visually where it makes sense. It's called a fragment identifier, and it allows you to link to a part of a page that you're on. You can do this in other ways too. You can link to other parts of your website. Let's say that I have two websites. All right, I could put a link in one website to link to the other one if I wanted to. All right. The two components, again, are the element that identifies the named fragment on the web page. That's the one for which you use the ID. And the anchor tag. And that's the one where you use the pound identifier, which means ID, and the name you used up above. Again, note the use of the pound sign in the anchor tag. All right. Again, there's an exercise on this, at least one, if not two of them. There's a hyperlink, relative and absolute type of a relative linking example on 297, and a fragment identifier exercise on page 299. All right, we've talked a little bit about accessibility in the past, and ARIA it's an acronym that stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It provides methods intended to increase accessibility of web pages and web apps for people who otherwise would find such type of accessibility problematic. All right. So they mentioned that a landmark on a page is a major section like a banner or navigation or something. ARA landmark roles allow web developers to configure semantic descriptions of HTML elements using the role attribute. So the idea is you can use some of these new tags, some of these new HTML5 tags to make it easier for people with accessibilities to be able to work their way around a website. Okay. Now, kind of an interesting slide right here, and it says opening a link in a new browser window. Well, you've seen hyperlinks like this before. href equals this. This is what's new. This means open that in a new window. All right, and I want to show you right now, I want to show you the difference between doing that and not doing that. So I'm going to grab this link right here. And I don't even think I created Chapter 7 probably folder, but I will do that right now. So let me grab my Chapter 6 folder, which is in my mess here someplace. Alright, so this will now be my Chapter 7. Okay, and if I open up the index right here, you've seen this before. I think that we have a, yeah, here you go for more information. All right, this is what I want to show you. Okay, so I'm going to run this particular file. Okay, and if I click right here, don't worry about the colors or anything, but the point is, clicking what that does is it's going to eventually open up the Rankin site on my own page. I didn't open it up in a new page. And if you say one more time, what do you mean? I'm going to close everything that I've got here. Everything. They're all closed. All right? And I'm going to open this one more time. And you'll notice that if I open this, that it opens, and it's opening right in that tab that I was in. See that? All right. But if I change that, or what we have right here, the ahref, etc., all the other goodies, all right, and we go in and we add the target equal blank. Let's see how that changes. Just going to hit enter right here because I'm running out of room. So target equals underscore blank. All right. Again, there is nothing open here. Okay. So now notice what happens. Now when I go and run this, again, there's only one file open, and when I click homepage, notice now there's two. It's opening it up in a new window. That's what that target equals underscore blank means. All right. There actually is something out there that's referred to as netiquette. Netiquette, I believe. And that's etiquette on the net. One thing says that if you're going to open up someone else's website based on a link in your website, you should always use target equal blank. Because otherwise you're giving the presumption that the site that you're opening up is part of your site. It's not an external site. So just get used to opening the link in a new browser window. Okay. All right. Configure block display elements with a hyperlink. As block anchor. This is in the book on page 301. All right, if you need more on the target, there is a hands-on practice also above that on 301. It's typical to use anchor tags to configure phrases or even just a single word as a hyperlink. HTML provides a new function for the anchor tag called a block anchor. A block anchor can contain one or more elements, even those that display as a block. All right, there is an example in the student files, and I guess it's what you're seeing here too. Telephone and text message hyperlinks. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but for instance, I looked up the phone number, or I went online, I used my phone, and I typed, found out where the Rankin bookstore was. And then I started to peruse my way through it, and I noticed that they had the name of the bookstore manager, and I clicked the hyperlink on his name, and it came up with his phone number, and when I clicked on his phone number, it brought up something like this that basically asked me, do I want to call that number? Which was much nicer. So if a web page displays a phone number, it's handy for the person using a smartphone to be able to just place the call by tapping something. And that's what we're doing here. All right. Back in Chapter 4, we talked a little bit, not much, but a little bit about CSS Sprites. And a sprite was defined as being an image that contains multiple small graphics. You can use CSS to configure these graphics combined in the sprite for different kinds of effects. All right. The CSS Sprites technique uses the background image background repeat and the background positioning properties to manipulate the placement of what goes on the background. Now you may or may not be able to tell, but if you look right here, what they've done in this running example throughout the book is they have grabbed where we have the navigation over here, and they have added little pictures onto the navigations. Those are the sprites. And that's what they have you do in the hands-on practice that's on pages 302 and 303 as well. As mentioned before, it's kind of a hodgepodgey chapter where there's just a lot of different stuff on it. In the last chapter, we talked about having a 2-column layout. Sometimes you want a 3-column layout. And here's an example. All right, here's the wireframe for it, and here's the way it would look. So what you have here is you notice that our header and our footer really stretch all 3 columns. But the first column here is our navigation area. Then the middle column, the bigger one, is our content area. And then we have basically a sidebar over here. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. All right. So again, sometimes you want a web page layout with a header across the top and 3 columns. Okay. In figure 710, or the one that you see on the screen, it shows that. They have you create this as a hands-on practice, which is one of the bigger ones so far in the book. Starts on page 304, it runs on to 305, 306, 307, 308, 309, and 310. And the important part about that is that you take the time, again, do a step and then run the program. Bring up the web page. Do another step and then bring up the web page again. So as you make changes, you can see what's involved here. So they're showing here what it's going to look like. You're floating this to the left, you're floating this to the right. So this will use the remaining screen area as far as what's left. And in your footer, you want to do a clear both because there's no reason for the footer, there's no reason to be floating anymore. Okay. Next, starting on the bottom of page 310 and going on to the next, the next 3 or 4, more than that, to about page 315, approximately. The chapter goes in and talks about CSS styling for print. Now, a couple things to think about for this. First of all, if I had a website that looked like this, that had a lot of color and stuff like that in it, probably one of the first things that I'm going to do when I'm working on CSS for a print is I'm going to change my background color to white and my text color to black, because there's no sense in me printing out things in color, typically at least. I might very well not be concerned with that. I might put a display none on this because I don't need to display that background right there, or that banner. I might not need to display any of the pictures, so I can put display none on those. Those are all things that you have to start thinking about as a really as a developer. All right, that if somebody is going to print out your web page on a printer or your website on a printer, what do you want them to show? What do you not want them to show? What do you care about? What do you not care about? Type of an idea. So in this section, they talk about creating an external style sheet for print. All right. Typically, you'll list it like this. By default, it defaults to media equals screen. We haven't put it on there so far because by default, that's what you use. But if you want one that goes specifically to print, then you'll want to say media equal print. And notice they call it wildflower.css, and it's wildflower print. Not a bad idea to put print in the name. Certainly not mandatory. But it's not a bad idea to do something like that just to make it easier for people looking at it to see what it is you're doing. These are some of the things I've already mentioned. You want to hide anything that's not essential. So use a display none. You want a natural font size. You want a natural font type. Some fonts display better for screen and some are better for print. You want to have some control over page breaks. There's no sense in having the URLs for hyperlinks. Why print the underscore? It's just a waste. So these are all things that you have to be thinking about. And some of these best practices, again, are mentioned on pages 310, 311, and 312. And again, there's a hands-on practice that goes through this, practice 7.6, that's on pages 313, 314, and 315. All right, so it's time in the chapter to jump into the mobile web stuff. All right. So back in chapter 5, we talked about the mobile web, and we even talked about some of the problems using the mobile web. I'm not going to read them. They're right in front of you, and we looked at them before. Bottom line is you got a smaller area that you're working with, and you want to maximize that in the best way possible. So some of these, if you want more on the best practices recommended by the World Wide Web Consortium, you can go out to the web links that are shown right there. But what do you want to do? You want to do things like optimize your layout for mobile use. So you want to set it up so it's going to look like this naturally. You want to optimize navigation. When you make it small enough, you're not going to have room up on top if you've got 4 or 5 different links. So you often see the little bars up there and you click it and that brings it down then. You want to optimize graphics. All right. Maybe you don't even want to show some, most, or maybe even all of your graphics. You want to optimize text also. The W3C has this mission of building one web, and that refers to the concept of providing a single resource that's configured for optimal display. And what does that mean? It means that you're going to end up using what are called media queries. All right, so these are all the things that you should be looking for. Here's the wireframe for this. So it's not going to look as nice probably because again, you're working with a smaller real estate area. All right, so some things to be concerned with in here. Providing minimal navigation, providing consistent navigation, avoiding hyperlinks that open files in new windows or pop-ups, balance the number of hyperlinks with the number of levels you need, avoid displaying images that you really don't need. Having good contrast, you have your own opinion as to whether or not that's good contrast. All right. Use common typefaces, font typefaces. Configure font size with M's or percentages. We talked a little bit about this before, but especially as you go and you work in mobile, which means people may be bouncing back and forth conceivably between cell phones, tablets, laptops, and maybe even desktops. For all that stuff, you want to use things that scale proportionally. So you want to use what are called M units or percentages. You don't want to use points or pixels. On the bottom of page 318 and going on to 319, they start talking about the viewport meta tag. All right. That was created originally as an Apple extension to help with displays on mobile devices, but now it's used on Android and any other kind of smartphone as well. All right. So as it says, it configures with an initial scale. So when you take a look at the stuff that's on there, the stuff that you see where it says content equal, etc., all that stuff, that is what are considered directives. All right. The width is for the width of the viewport in pixels. Then notice we say width equal device width, which means use all that you've got available to you. The height, a lot of times isn't even listed. The initial scale is the initial scale of the viewport. If you set it to 1 like it is here, that means set it to 100%. You can, if you want to or need to, put in a minimum and a maximum scale. All right. So all this stuff ends up working in conjunction with what are referred to as media queries. And what media queries do is they're about as close as we've seen thus far to putting programming inside of CSS. So in other words, this says that everything that's in here goes up to a maximum width of 768. Now this is going to sound a little maybe a little weird or whatever. But when you work with these media queries, you've got kind of cutoff points, for lack of better words, that have sizes for certain devices. All right, and we'll get into this more as we go on in here. But according to the W3C, a media query is made up of a media type like a screen and a logical expression that determines the capabilities of the device the browser is running on. Things like screen resolution, orientation, portrait versus landscape, etc. Now, in your book, on page 320, they show an example of a media query. It's more similar to what we just saw on the previous page right here at the bottom of the page. There are different media types that you can use when you work with these media queries. You can set it to all for all devices, screen for the screen display of a web page, only, which causes older non-supporting browsers to ignore the media query, and print, to print out a web page. Another way that you can do this is you can set up what are called media rules. All right, that's very similar to what you see on the bottom of the screen there. But a lot of times what you do is you put in there, for lack of better words, what you want. You can put in minimums and you can put in maximums. All right, and there are size requirements and sizes that are typically used with this kind of stuff. All right, to get you in the groove, so to speak, for using this, there is hands-on practice 7.7 that's on pages 322, 323, and 324. All right, which will at least get you started with it. All right. On page 324, they start talking about the next topic here, which are flexible images. A flexible image is a fluid image that will not break the layout as the browser viewport is resized. All right. The easiest way to try to get a flexible image is to put in there max width 100% along with the height auto that you see there. All right, so you remove the height and width from attributes, actually from the image tag or whatever, and you configure the max width at 100%. That way, if the width is less than the width of the container element, the image will display in its actual dimensions. If it's greater, it'll be resized to fit in the browser. The suggestion for the height auto is so that it stays scalable. All right, that's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended. Again, there is another hands-on practice on pages 325 and 326 for this. All right. The next thing here on 326 through about 328 talks about testing mobile display. All right. And there are a lot of different, if you want, for instance, if somebody says, well, hey, I'd like to test my device for IE6, but I can't find IE6 anymore, then you use what are typically called emulators. All right, and there's emulators for just about anything. If I come out here and type in Internet Explorer 6 emulator, all right, simulate IE6 on an OS, etc. So how can I test my site in these? You look in there, and there are emulators that literally exist for this stuff. And of course, I'm not going to remember how to show it to you right now, but if I hit F12 like this, and I bring up, remember what this shows in here, is this is going to bring up Chrome Developer Tools. There is one of these options here. It's not there. Let's see. responsive design mode, is that the one? So I can sit there and come in and say, okay, how would this page look in, in that kind of designation? So what I'm telling you is there are even some emulation that is literally built in to different types of browsers. Okay, all right. If you want more on that, it's 326 through 328, as I mentioned. Now, for some people, what they do is they start thinking, okay, I get all that. I get what you're talking about, but exactly how do I start to test for mobile? And there's two schools of thought on this. Don't worry about what's on the screen right now. Some people believe that if you're creating a new website, you should build mobile first. In other words, you should plan for the smallest type of media and then expand as needed. Unfortunately, many sites have been already written where they have to almost go the other way. In other words, that rather than going mobile first, they're almost mobile last. But with a new site, you really should go with mobile first. All right. The last thing, I believe, that's mentioned in this chapter, yes it is, starting on the bottom of 328 and going for the last 4 or 5 pages, is a relatively new thing that's referred to as, typically it's referred to as Flexbox. As it says, it's a CSS flexible box layout module. All right? And in many ways, it's been created to help replace having to worry about all the floats and stuff that we do. Now you'll notice it says that it's not yet well supported by browsers. Well, let's check. So this is the can I use for Flexbox. The good news is when you look at this, all right, partial support in IE 8 and none in 8, partial in 11, partial in the Android browser, but virtually everybody else supports it. All the newer browsers do support it. And again, that is good news. Now, they go through this and they talk about how to use it. What I do want to mention to you, all right, what I do want to show you is, and I brought this up, I literally came in and I Googled CSS Flexbox, and here is the CSS Flexible Box, which you can get to from W3 Schools. Again, a great place to start. It talks about the concepts, gives you an example, and to try it yourself, it shows you what it's going to look like, type of an idea. All right, so that's the first one. Then I went out to CSSTricks.com, and they have a complete guide to Flexbox. And this, I will tell you, I will warn you, this is not that, it's not that long, but I guess there's a lot of comments in it, but there is no such thing as an all-inclusive guide, but it will get you started. Finally, I went out to developer.mozilla.org, and there's an article there using CSS flexible boxes. Again, notice what it says. It's a layout mode providing for the arrangement of elements on a page such that the elements behave predictably when the page layout must accommodate different screen sizes. So again, we're trying to be able to support multiple screen sizes, screen types, etc. And that's what the rest of this is about. All right. With these debugging tips, you've already seen this stuff. You saw it in an earlier chapter. The biggest thing is look through your code, be patient, don't be afraid to comment things out. But again, you're best off whether you're writing HTML or whether you're writing CSS, or later on when we write some JavaScript. Write a little bit of code, then test it. Write a little more and test it. Don't write a lot of code and then start testing. All right, so this chapter, again, was kind of a mishmash. It had a variety of topics. We talked about hyperlinks, page layout, and we talked a lot about the mobile web. All right, so when I come back with the next chapter, which is just open up the rest of them I got left here. Chapter 8, I believe, is on tables. So next will be Chapter 8. And again, Chapter 8 starts in the book on page 355. And yes, indeed, it is the concept of tables. It is a short chapter, so it shouldn't take us too long to get through that. I will come back shortly to begin that chapter.